C9 is in shambles, and already people are talking about possible roster moves for summer. It is amazing all the discussions surrounding C9 when they're not even in it anymore. We have 100 Thieves going to the finals. TL and EG also definitely have something to say about that, and they will play this weekend in Houston as well. And then SPICA discussions, or not even SPICA discussions, but rumors about Bo possibly going to TSM and then Spica possibly being replaced. We will get into all of that this episode. This is episode 82 of the Clown Fiesta podcast with Blue Jay and JNT250. Before we get into the C9 stuff and before we get to the Spica stuff, we got to talk about the games this weekend because there were some banger games, especially in the TL 100 series. JNT, let's start right there. What did you think of the games?
Yeah. It was just a really weird series because the way that it started in games 1 and 2, and even game 1, like I tweeted about this. I was just like, if 100 Thieves doesn't win game 1, this is going to be like the fastest 3-0 I've ever seen in my life. And
I kind
like,
of agreed with you on that, by the way.
yeah,
I
and
did
like
agree with that.
game 1 happened, like who he inted, and they just got shit on. Game 2, they kind of just got shit on again, and then it just was really looking pretty doom and gloom for 100 Thieves. And like, I was really starting to question, like, is 100 Thieves, like, how much did they actually benefit from Cloud9 looking so terrible? Because like, this was obviously before Cloud9 put up the stinker against EG. So like, in those first 2 games, it was kind of making me like rethink my whole opinion on 100 Thieves. It's like, well, is this team actually that good, or did they just beat up a not so great C9? And then obviously in banger fashion, they pulled out the reverse sweep, ending with the TF backdoor on the Nexus. I mean, that was like the most obvious thing I've ever seen, but I guess TL like didn't do the math, and but
That
there was a
was
banger.
crazy. No, that was absolutely insane. And I told you as we're watching that game, guys, my heart is literally racing watching these games. JNT knows I get stressed out watching these games. And it's because they're actually so hyped. They're actually so good. And you mentioned the backdoor in the Nexus. That is incredibly hyped. But you also mentioned you got to know that's coming. And as soon as we saw Bjergsen start to TP, we said, that's wrong. Like, don't do that. That is a big mistake. If like, look, I actually think Bjergsen's been playing really good as of late. I think I'm more hotter on Bjergsen than most people are. We don't need to get into that. I think he's playing well for the most part, but that is a really big mistake. You have Corki package. You can get to Dragon very quickly. There's no need to TP there, especially because you're not even TPing to the Dragon necessarily. You're TPing like halfway there to almost blue buff. You get there in no time with Corki package. So that was, to me, it felt like everyone in the world knew that a backdoor was possible, and he wastes his TP. Whereas, like, what could have happened? Well, I guess I don't even know where he would TP to. Actually, thinking about it, I forget, were the Nexus turrets down? They were, right?
Well, they were, but like, what
So
you're
I guess the
supposed
play
to
would be to
do,
drop a ward there, and then you could TP to the ward
yeah,
if things are
whenever
going bad.
you have an open Nexus, you should always put a ward in your base and put a pink ward. Put a pink ward in your fountain. Like that's like the number one rule of like when you're getting open Nexus is you put a pink ward in your fountain.
And that's very doable there. You could put that down and then use the package and just run to Dragon. Now, maybe he didn't have room in his inventory or something. I don't know. But someone on that team needs to have room in their inventory to put a ward down. Someone, because everyone, like I said, everyone in the world knows that TF is going to try to backdoor the Nexus. Even if 100 Thieves goes to take that fight and the fight starts to go bad, TF might just be like, this ain't looking good. I'm going to ulti back to your Nexus. So, yeah, that was pretty disappointing. Even though I think Bjergsen had a pretty good series for the most part, that was kind of some bean soupery.
Yeah, and I mean, like, once 100 Thieves started to really like gain momentum in the series, and we kind of saw just like Closer completely take over every single game, it like once again, like I was talking about how in game 1 and game 2, I was kind of rethinking my whole thoughts about like 100 Thieves and like, oh my god, like is this team actually that good? And then the reverse happened, where just like TL just like they're just like throwing up like stinker after stinker game. I mean, like game 5 was the closest of those back 3 in my opinion. But it's just weird because I tweeted about this also after the series. Like for me, one of the things that I've always thought about Team Liquid, and one of the reasons why I think they've consistently been the best team since franchising came into place, is they've always they've always had such a great team in terms of individual players and their ability to play almost anything in the best of 5 series. Like no matter whatever the roster was, like even when it was back to the original like Olay, Pobelter, like Impact Doublelift, Xmithy lineup, like those were all like very flexible players in terms of the play styles that they were able to do and the way that they drafted. And for me in this series, like TL kind of did a bit of a C9 here where they just like refused to like put some respect on Ornn's name, or at least they played into it sort of offensively in terms of like picking a very aggressive early game champion as opposed to kind of matching the scaling. And does that necessarily mean you have to opt into like tank versus tank? No. I think there are like plenty of other good split push sort of AD bruisers that can really, dumpster Ornn in a silent, like a Camille, like a Fiora. We did see Camille as an answer to Ornn in the Cloud9 EG series, but it was just super weird. TL's just kind of decision making to throw a bunch of aggressive top lane picks when we've just seen Ornn be this like huge neutralizer champion that really doesn't lose lane unless you're making massive, massive mistakes. And Someday has not been making those mistakes at all this whole season.
Yeah, so there's a couple ways to argue this. One is like, even if you don't think Ornn is broken, which I think most of the community definitely thinks it is, even if you don't think that, you can clearly tell that Someday is absolutely popping off on this pick. I can't even tell you how many team fights were swung from Someday just being an absolute monster. There was the one, God, I don't even remember which game it was, but within the span of like 10 seconds, do you remember the play where TL is chasing back 100 Thieves? They see Abadage on the TF. I guess it would have been game 5 because he's on TF. They see Abadage basing on the ward, and then they go like full send to engage. In that team fight, um, Someday knocks up 7 different people in the span of 10 seconds. He gets a 2-man knockup into a 3-man ulti into a 2-man knockup once again. And that is like, when you're seeing that kind of level of performance, and that's not the first time we've seen it, that's when you start to say, look, maybe this pick warrants a ban, or yeah, warrants a ban. And we didn't see that. So you kind of have to wonder at what point you got to start respecting. And it doesn't, to your point, it didn't really seem like TL was willing to give that respect.
Yeah, and it's just weird because one of the reasons I know they were talking about on the co-streams, I guess at the time we were watching the Sneaky Meteos Doublelift one, and one of the things they mentioned, like specifically with top laners, and like this is something they've even mentioned in the past, is how like top laners kind of have like this ego when it comes to picking like a tank versus tank matchup, or just like kind of giving up on the lane and saying like, oh, like I'm not gonna like play a tank into Ornn, like I'm gonna play this aggressive pick and try to beat it. And part of the thing that maybe like teams are sort of underrating about Ornn is just like how different scrim games are compared to like normal stage games. Because I think in the past, like there's tons of evidence of players verbally saying that like scrim games are often very, very, fast paced in relative terms to like compared to pro play. Like there's a lot more kills in the early game. There's a lot more early fighting because like, look, the games don't matter. Like you're trying to practice, you're trying to learn, you're trying to understand how much, damage your champions do in team fights, how your team sort of operates within team fights if you're trying something new. And it's just pretty like a champion like Ornn can sometimes lose a lot of value in these much faster games where you want to be picking sort of maybe a better laner, a higher damage top lane pick. But in these games, like you watch every single Ornn game that we've ever seen this whole entire playoffs run, like whether it was 100 Thieves versus Cloud9 at the beginning, whether it was this series between TL and 100 Thieves, or it was even the Cloud9 EG series, like Ornn is just like such a difficult champion to remove from lane. The only time I remember Ornn dying in lane in this series was when they picked the Lucian top and they dove on like a 2.5 stacked wave top lane after like Buppo was playing like perma aggressive on Lucian top when they split the map. And I actually thought that was a really good play by 100 Thieves to do a late invade into the enemy top side, force a map split, and then play to just kill the Ornn. Like they dived him once, but unfortunately, like even with being down 20 CS and dying in the early game, once like 50 minutes just happens, like this champion is just too useful. And unless you have completely stomped and rolled over the enemy team by level 13, 14, 15, like you're quickly, like whatever gold that you have is quickly diminishing because of the free Ornn items that they get.
Yeah. So I just want to quickly shout out Travis Gafford for the raid. We really appreciate that, Travis. We welcome all few hundred viewers. We really, really appreciate that. Huge shout out to you. And for those that are new to the channel, be sure to hit that follow button. It really helps us out a lot. Anyways, back to your point, J&T. about the Ornn pick. You mentioned how they're able to get some advantages against that pick in the lane, like with the Lucian. I think even with the Camille at one point they got an advantage top as well. But it doesn't matter because it's against Ornn, and that champ scales like crazy, like you mentioned with the Ornn items. And it's like you can't shut this guy down. Now, like I said before, there's a few ways to look at this. When it comes to Someday, if you think you're banning out Someday just by banning Ornn, you're not, because this guy's been a monster on many different picks throughout the whole split. So there's that side of the argument as well. And maybe that's the lens that TL is looking at it through. Like, look, yes, we can ban Ornn, but this guy has been one of the best top laners this split. So maybe you need to ban more to really have an effect on draft. So like, there's that side of the argument as well. And I don't think it's fair to just completely dismiss that. On top of all of this, we have to talk about Closer being an absolute beast this series as well. And I remember I tweeted out something along the lines of like, TL recognizes that to shut down 100 Thieves, they have to shut down Closer being able to engage, whether it be on the Lee Sin, which was I think permabanned, or the Jarvan, which you saw him absolutely pop off on as well. I think that's something that TL recognized. However, it still was not enough in this series, because even in game 5, when you did push him onto Viego, which by the way, Viego is an amazing champion for Closer as well, even when you did push him onto Viego, well, once again, like I mentioned, Someday still showed up in game 5 there also. So it's like, I totally understand the just ban Ornn and everything will be fine side of the argument. But it's such a simplification against what is a really, really good top side of the map right now. Like 100 Thieves, it's just, they're probably the best jungler, the best top in the league right now. And yes, I know a lot of people will say, well, what about Summit? Well, guys, after these playoffs, it's
fell off.
kind of, yeah, yeah.
Well, I just remember reading a bunch of tweets like after the Cloud9 series, and it's just going to be like, people were just saying like, how awkward is it going to be when Summit is announced the MVP during like the finals weekend, when like he completely got like shit on in the 2 series that they were playing other top teams. I think like his combined KDA in those 6 games was like, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was like 7, 34, and 12. Like, bro, that's like kind of Niles territory right there. Like, a bit scary.
I'm not looking forward to that. Man, I'll feel so bad when he has to. Well, I mean, everyone's just assuming he's accepting the reward, and I definitely see why. But yeah, if that happens, we'll say that is going to be rough to watch. But okay, what else about this series, JNT? Let's stick with this stuff for now. Any other thoughts on this series in particular?
Last thing, well, just on not last thing, but on the Ornn point, I'll just close that out, and I'll kind of maintain the same opinion that I had of it 2 weeks ago when Cloud9 played 100 Thieves. Is I don't think it's just as simple as ban Ornn and we're good, because I much prefer the playstyle of picking tank versus tank matchup or taking some sort of scaling 80 split push top laner that can really affect the map in different ways. Whether it's the split push in the late game, and therefore drawing the Ornn or drawing a primary damage dealer into the side lane while your team jockeys for position around major objectives. Like, I know we only saw the Camille that one time. I'm sorry, I'm referencing like the other series again, but like Camille into Ornn felt like a really good matchup because it's a good matchup in lane. It's a good matchup for the side lanes. And I feel like if you go sort of that path to playing against the Ornn, I think you'll see much different results in terms of the effectiveness that a top laner can have in the mid and late game team fights, as opposed to picking this early aggressive champion and trying to shut it down in the early game. Because unless you're doing what TL did in game 4, where you split the map early, dive the Ornn on stacked waves, and try to blow the game up through that, and they did that fairly successfully in the first 10 minutes before the game sort of slowed down and like reached a stalling point. Like, I think it is a really viable way to beat Ornn. But overall, like, the champion's still really good. Like, I think at some point you just gotta take the L and like throw the respect ban at it, unless you're willing to blind pick it yourself. And that was the weird part, was TL themselves weren't willing to blind pick Ornn or just pick it like to begin with. When I was watching this game 5 draft, I was like, wow, like either TL is like, they've got the balls because they're just like leaving Ornn to get blind picked for 100 Thieves, and it's been their best champion the entire, like, pretty much all of playoffs, maybe that, or like Closer's Lee Sin or Jarvan. But like, they just gave it up again and they went with the Shen pick. Like, the Shen pick was kind of weird. Like, it still did some like decent work in lane, but you kind of just saw like Ornn was just outvaluing him later in the game.
Yeah, I agree. I for the record, I do like the Shen pick, but I do want to focus on some other things. I want to take it back to last week. Do you recall last week when I said, like, I have faith that Abaddage will show up this series? And then I remember even saying, like, I'm afraid that I might eat my words on that because he has not been the consistent Abadage that we've seen, well, all this split long, right? It's only been the last month or so that Abadage has gotten to play to the level that we expect of him. Do you recall this, JNT?
Yeah, yeah.
And then the first two games happen, and he's getting absolutely smashed, especially on the Vex. I mentioned how Bjergsen had a good series. That one game, I think it was game 2, he had the lane frozen, and shoot shout out to Azale and Jet that mentioned this many times on broadcast. He had the lane frozen on Abadage many times. I guess I should say him and Core JJ were setting up those frozen lanes and just playing with him over and over again, just smashing him because he has no flash. And I remember watching game 2 going, oh, this is gonna be a rough episode this week because I'm gonna have to own my words that Abadage, would look good. But then he actually started to look a lot better as the series went on. We mentioned the TF where he, was able to backdoor the Nexus. That was like more of like a one play kind of thing and more of a TL mistake. But let's talk about the LeBlanc game. The LeBlanc game, he is putting out a lot of pressure and doing exactly what you want out of LeBlanc, just one-shotting people. And honestly, just getting his team the Baron because he's chunking out some of the enemy players. Like, unreal the change that we saw from Abadage in game 1 and 2 through the rest of the series. And thank God, because he saved face, or helped me save face a little bit with that performance that he had in the later half of the series.
Yeah, like it just felt like we watched two completely different series from games 1 to 2 and then 3 to 5. Like it was just so confusing how like the game just got completely flipped on its head in terms of like what teams are willing to do. Like even in game 3, I thought Abadage also had a really good game playing the Orianna. Like 100 Thieves just went for this straight up team fight comp that only team fights and like let's off the champions like Ornn, Jarvan, Orianna, Lucian Nami. I thought the Lucian Nami pick out of FBI and Hui was actually really, really good, sort of to counter, the early Zeri pick out of Team Liquid. Now, the blame Team Liquid a little bit with the Soraka pick on Core JJ. Seems like a bit of a weird pick, just considering that like Soraka isn't necessarily the strongest champion in lane, and Lucian Nami is like probably the best early game bot lane you could play. Maybe like Caitlyn Lux you could add there, or like I don't know, like Nautilus was something else. Maybe like Samira Nautilus in terms of like fighting power,
Nautilus
but like
was probably banned. I don't know, but Nautilus like.
Well, I just mean in general in terms of like
series
power and like lane and for bot lanes, and that was just a weird game where you just saw like Lucian Nami sort of take control of the early game in the lane phase, and 100 Thieves once again just played the scaling game, and they just had this really fed Ornn and Orianna absolutely womboing people down in team fights.
It is a weapon that 100 Thieves has used before. Did they use that against Cloud9 as well?
Lucian Nami?
Yeah. I thought they played that in the C9 series.
I thought Danny and Vulcan played it in the EGTL series prior.
Maybe. I could be confusing it with a different series, but it is something we've seen FBI and Huhi play in the past. On the Huhi thing, he was another guy that had a really rough start to the series. Like, usually you could put Huhi on set and expect some good freaking things to come out of that. His set looked atrocious. I think that was game 1. And I wouldn't even say that the rest of the series he looked great, but he definitely looked better than he did in game 1. And that's something that, like, I guess that's why I'm not. For me, it's not like, oh, everything's cool with 100 Thieves. You're still really heavily relying on top and jungle to carry this team at the moment. So while they did beat TL this weekend, I'm not so sure that, like, everything's fine, everything's fixed. They still have some stuff to work on, and they could still definitely be challenged in the finals.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about, like, overall series, like, Closer and Someday had very good series, like, from pretty much start to finish.
Things were the reasons 100 Thieves win that series.
Yeah, I mean,
two players.
Games 1 and 2 were a little bit out of their control because, like you mentioned, he had a pretty atrocious game 1. Just I don't even know if it was like he was clueless or if he was disrespecting or if he just like wasn't paying attention to like the other bot lane was hitting level 2 first, and like you're a set with E level 1. Like you don't have W, you don't have survivability, you don't have damage because you don't have your W, and then like once again like he literally walked into Jinx traps, into getting one shot combo down, and like at that point you had already like been 2k gold behind. Like dude, Hansama had a 9-minute mythic item like on Jinx.
It's worrying. It's really worrying because that's supposed to be one of his pocket picks, right? Like he is supposed to be a really good set support player, and that was probably his worst game of the series. Maybe I'm missing another game, but definitely one of his worst games of the series, and it was not a good performance. So that's something like if I'm a 100 Thieves fan, I'm a little bit worried about that.
And especially considering like the strength of Danny, which we saw this weekend in Cloud9, like Danny was popping off hardcore, and that's not the greatest look when your bot lane didn't have their greatest performance. At least support anyway. I don't think FBI had a bad series by any means, but Hui had some questionable games. Games 1, 2, and 4 were a bit questionable.
Yeah, and that is worrying. Yeah, like yes, they're in the finals, but like you mentioned, Danny and Vulcan had a great weekend, and then so did even though TL lost that series. I think most people would agree that Hansama is going to win the MVP of the series if TL wins that series. Like, and Core JJ was great as well. Like I mentioned in game 2, he was a big
Minus
part
Soraka.
he was a big part of why they ended up getting minus the Soraka. He was a big part as to why they got those leads against Abadage in game 2. That wasn't just Bjergsen. That was a lot of Core JJ roaming as well, and his Rakan was fantastic. That just reminded me. The Rakan out of who he was pretty bad as well.
Yeah, that was game
So
4. That's why I said 1, 2, and 4.
yeah, so a couple of things to be worried about with Huhi. Last thing I want to touch on for this series is Bwipo. I'll continue to say it. I don't think we've seen the same Bwipo that we saw at the start of the split. And we mentioned, I think most people would have agreed, honestly. I don't think this is any hot take, that at the start of the split, we always talked about TL as being that team that could carry through any lane. And I'm not as convinced anymore because we've seen a lot of inconsistent gameplay out of Bwipo. He has not been that solid rock, and he was definitely an MVP candidate midway through the split. We're not seeing that. I mentioned how his last series, I did not think he looked good. I think this was another one where like he just got hard outplayed by Someday. And yes, Someday is currently the best top laner in the league, but there was a pretty big gap there, and that's not something that I would have expected out of Bwipo from him before he came over to North America.
Yeah, I mean, even in their game 2 loss, but when 100 Thieves lost TL1, Someday was, getting the upper hand against Bwipo in the Tryndamere versus Aatrox matchup. So, I think you are correct in that, our original thoughts about this TL roster was, they can win through any lane, and every lane is most likely going to win their lane. And that's why this team is going to be such a dominant force, is because you're most likely going to have these scenarios where every lane is winning, therefore Santorin can do whatever he wants, therefore all early objectives are normally going to go in the favor of Team Liquid. And over the course of the season, I think we've just seen a bit of a slow decline out of Bwipo. Not as sharp as what we've seen at a Summit, but just, week by week, I would say ever since week 3. Ever since their week 4 matchup against C9, back then when Bwipo was playing the Jax, ever since then it's been just going down bit by bit every week, and unfortunately, bit by bit, it's turned into 7 weeks in a row now.
And some copium that you could have is, look, it's still Bwipo. He's still a longtime veteran. If there's someone that could come out of a funk like this, it would be someone like Bwipo. But like you mentioned, since week 3 or whatever, it's been a
After
while,
week
I guess
3.
is the point. It's been some time that we haven't seen top tier Bwipo. And so that's where, if I'm a TL fan, I'm a little bit more worried. Did you have any other thoughts on this series, or did you want to move on to the next one?
No, we can go to the next one.
Before we do, this is where I want to plug the prop sheet that we are going to do this weekend. It's a perfect opportunity, especially with the raid from Travis. For people that don't know what the heck I'm talking about, J&T and I like to do a prop sheet for all the, spring finals, summer finals, or for Worlds, or the grand finals. And what does that mean? Well, we're going to do a prop sheet where it is completely free to enter. And we just basically ask some fun questions so that if you do not have your favorite team in it, you can participate and still enjoy the finals. Let's say you're a Cloud9 fan, rip all the Cloud9 fans. You can still enjoy it if you have a chance of winning the prop sheet. And yes, you just win cash. That's basically, we put up a prize pool. The way we fund it is we just fund it through our subs or donations. So if you guys want to contribute, we would really, really appreciate that, so we can have not such a baby prize pool. Please consider subbing, and please consider donating if you want to help contribute to that. Like I said, it's completely free to enter. We just think it's a fun little thing to do every once in a while. J&T, do you have any examples of some questions that might be on the prop sheet?
Well, I was just going to say, the quick TLDR, listen here, folks, it's free entry. It'll take probably less than 5 minutes of your time, and you can win some money. So, what more do you want?
For those listening on YouTube, we are gonna. I'll tweet. I'll tweet once the prop sheet is ready. We'll probably have it ready tomorrow. I'll tweet once it's ready. We also have a Discord. You can join our Discord. We will post it in there as well. And yeah, so some of the questions. So, for example, will Danny get a pentakill or a quadra-kill? Obviously, we've seen Danny get quite a few of those lately. So if you think you know the answer to that, you might do well in this prop sheet. What else? Will Closer play Lee Sin? Will there be a backdoor of the Nexus? These kinds of things where it's just yes or no answers. It's really, really simple to fill out, like J&T mentioned. Shouldn't take more than 5 minutes. And obviously, you could win some cash. Usually, we try to just give out RP, but we will do whatever we can to make it work. And once we know, once we have, like, by the end of the week, I guess we'll announce what the prize pool will be, or that will be put on the prop sheet. Actually, we'll put that at the very top in the details. So definitely be sure to keep an eye on that. And put in the live chat it's exclamation point Discord, right? Perfect. So if you want to join the Discord, we will be posting it tomorrow probably.
Yeah.
Now, let's get over to the C9EG stuff. Because this series was interesting, but not for all good reasons, honestly. You could argue that it was interesting for some very bad reasons. J&T, okay, I'm going to let you start here. So for those that don't know, J&T is a Cloud9 fan. I'll let you go for as long as you want. If you want to go for just 10 seconds, by all means. If you want to go for 10 minutes, by all means, J&T. Get your thoughts out there. If you're tilted, be as salty as you can. Just be authentic. How do you feel after watching C9 get absolutely destroyed by EG, and not even just that, but fall off a cliff in the span of like a month?
Yeah, I guess I'll throw this back to Season 10 summer. And if people remember what went back then. Cloud9, they won spring. They went 17-1 in the spring split. They were destroying everybody. It literally wasn't close. They dropped, I think, 2 games the entire season, which was 1 game towards the end of the regular season, and then they lost 1 game to EG in the semifinals of playoffs. And, unfortunately, there was no MSI that year because of COVID. But going into summer, everyone was like, oh, Cloud9's the best team. Like, it's not even close. Like, if my memory serves me correct, Cloud9 was number 1, going 17-1 in the season. And the next highest seed, number 2, their record was 10-8. So, like, it wasn't even close. And, like, the same thing, we went into summer, and Cloud9 started off 9-0, and I was like, oh, okay, wrap it up. Like, Cloud9's the best team. Like, who's playing for second? Like, that's basically what the conversation was. And during that summer split, like, Cloud9 just completely fell off a cliff in terms of they weren't really willing to adapt their drafts, and, they were kind of just playing the old meta from old spring and early summer, where the jungle meta kind of got, like, flipped on its head a little bit because, back in Season 10, like, the big meta jungler picks were, like, Jarvan, Olaf, and Lee Sin. And then it kind of turned into this way more slowed and controlled meta, as opposed to this, like, huge early game skirmishing meta, which we saw Cloud9 really thrive on with Niski and Blabber. And, like, they were just like the motor that would, like, push Cloud9 along. And I feel like we're in, like, a very similar situation right now, because Cloud9, they came into the split, they were looking really, really strong. They were the number 1 team with 2 weeks left into the regular season. I think everybody was safely assuming that this team was going to finish number 1, and this team was the favorite to, go to MSI once again. And, similar situation, like, Summit was the MVP. He's destroying everybody. Blabber, he's destroying everybody. Fudge's role swap, actually looking really, really good. And he's, like, contesting, like, for a top 3 mid in an A. Like, I think both of us put him as the second best mid in terms of all pro teams. I think he ended up being 3rd behind Takui. But basically, Fudge roll swap and was a top 3 mid. And Berserker was just insane. Like, it felt like this guy was, like, not making any mistakes. His early game was crazy. Like, and then Winsome, like, he was clearly the problem on Cloud9, but it wasn't like he was, like, terrible. Like, he was still...
It was not nearly the problem that we had seen as of late out of Winsome, right?
Well,
and
like,
to your point, Berserker was a beast at the very start of the split. He was a monster.
He was just serviceable, and he was just, like, along for the ride with Cloud9. But all of a sudden, like, with 2 weeks left into the regular season, we just saw this complete flip out of Cloud9, where Blabber wasn't as active in the early game. Summit was dying a lot in all these lanes. And even we go back to the 100 Thieves series, and that was really where the red flag started to arise for me, was because Cloud9's early game had just gone into complete shambles. It just felt like they had no plan in the early game. They didn't, like, Blabber really was just, like, perma farming and, like, not really doing anything. And I think if you look at game 1 in this Cloud9 versus EG series, like, this is basically all my fears coming true, where they didn't know what to do in the early game. I mean, they're playing this super aggressive comp in terms of early game, where they counterpick the Jace into the Ornn top, Jace being one of Summit's best picks that's consistently been banned for basically, like, the last 2 months. It feels like he hasn't gotten a game on that ever since he destroyed Fake God. Like, it was, like, disgusting how hard he destroyed him. And they pick Caitlyn Lux bot lane with Lee Sin and Akali, 2 very aggressive champions that want to fight and want to get involved, in team fights early. And we just saw EG institute the same exact game plan that 100 Thieves did 2 weeks prior, where let's pick Ornn and let's gank top. and it was pretty much exactly what we saw in that 100 Thieves series. Was the same exact thing we saw in this series. Summit not respecting ganks, not playing around his jungler very well, and or vice versa. Blabber not playing around his lanes very well in terms of, not being there to support when they want to push out waves, not really being where he should be on specific timings when like people are getting their ults, and it was just like a complete mess. Like everything was a mess. Like I don't think there was a single thing that went right in this series. The only thing you could say that went right was like Cloud9 got dragons, and that was about it. And that was the only reason why games 1 or 2 was even closer than it should have been, was because EG was doing a little bit of trolling in terms of like overextending for like extra kills in team fights, and then they might get one traded back, and then we lost all of our tempo, and now we have to give up drag. Like game 1 was like a stomp, and the only reason that it wasn't a complete shit stomp was because Cloud9 had Ocean Soul, but like they lost with Ocean Soul and Elder. Like I don't think I've ever seen that in a game, unless it was like a CLG game.
I promised that I wouldn't cut you off and I'd let you go, but I do want to push back on something. I'm sorry to cut you off. I broke my promise, because you mentioned that like the only thing that went well is they got drags. I would also say that their bot lane looked pretty good. Like to me, this was very much a like C9's bot lane did nothing wrong, and everywhere else kind of did, especially top and jungle. Would you agree with that sentiment or not really?
Yeah, and I mean, once again, like that was pretty much the exact mirror of what happened back in season 10. Was Sven and Vulcan were the only guys, playing well at the time. Everyone like at the time, the whole meme was like they were playing Ezreal Yumi when like those picks had kind of fallen off in terms of priority, and people were saying like, "Oh my God, Cloud9 draft so bad they're picking Ezreal Yumi," but like Sven and Vulcan were the only ones doing anything on that team. Like Niski was running it down, Blabber was running it down, and Licorice was just like, eh. And basically right now, Summit's running it down, Blabber's running it down, and Fudge is just like, eh. Like I don't know, like. It was weird how they kind of changed up their whole mid lane priority in this series as well, when Fudge had been doing so well on like the Ahri, Victor, Orianna type styles. And I know Ahri was, I think, banned the entire series, but we often saw like Jojopyun take the Victor blind pick for free, and Fudge's answers just weren't very effective at all whatsoever. Like Jojopyun was running show on that pick. Like it was disgusting.
Yeah, JoJo had a really good series, honestly, especially on the Rise. I was really impressed with. He was always the first one to roam and make a play happen, and Fudge very rarely had an answer. There was one play, I think it was the Akali, when he was playing Akali, he had an answer where like you answer on the other side of the map, like EG ganks top, so you try to make a play bot, and that's pretty standard. But we didn't see much of it. I think that was the only one, at least that stood out to me, where like okay, there was finally an answer from mid lane. But I mean, that is not enough to really do anything in a series. That's not enough to. Well, clearly, it wasn't even enough to get one win, let alone win three and win the whole series. Definitely. I don't even want to say a surprise out of Cloud9 because of how bad they looked as of late. I gotta ask though. I know you're kind of done with your rant, but I gotta ask: are you more mad or more sad?
I guess I wouldn't say I'm mad, because I don't think the result that happened was like surprising by any means. Like,
Okay.
I guess like maybe 2 weeks ago in 100 Thieves, I was like a little bit mad because it's just like what the fuck is going
Disappointed,
on?
perhaps?
Yeah, I wouldn't say mad. I don't think I'm ever mad. Unless
Okay.
I guess I would only be mad if you like throw an unlosable game or something like that. That would
Yeah.
get me mad. But I was in no position to win any of these games by any means.
Yeah, and even though like we talk a lot about Cloud9 looking pretty bad in this series, there was some pretty good things out of EG. I mean, we saw the Nocturne was clearly an effective pick. I really liked the Nocturne with the Yumi.
Well,
That's obviously a pretty good combo. You can deliver two champions from a mile away. Like that's a pretty good combo. Obviously, they did it with. I think they did it with Ornn as well. Was that the Ornn game?
Yeah, they played Ornn
They were
Nocturne in
running
game
Ornn
one.
with it
Yeah.
like that. I mean, talk about a way to punish a guy that overextends. That is the perfect
Well,
weapon
here,
to do it, and they
do,
executed perfect on it.
do,
Yes,
do
it might be
you
easy to do, but they did that.
do you remember last week when we were talking about the Cloud9 Golden Guardians series? And I know this was kind of a point that you pushed back on me, where I was saying like I think this was like I was talking about Golden Guardians, was saying that this was like the best that they could have looked to try to potentially win this series, even though they got 0-3. And you were like, they could have looked better. But one of the reasons why I kind of said
Golden
that,
Guardians could have looked better, or
yeah,
C9.
Golden Guardians, because one of the reasons why I
Okay.
said that about the Golden Guardians series is we saw the Ornn Nocturne be a pretty effective answer into Summit, specifically in that game one, where Summit was playing Gangplank into Licorice Ornn, and Pride Soccer was playing the Nocturne. And Summit died like 3 times really early on in the game, like I think 3 deaths in a row, and I think it was around like 7 to like 11 minutes, where he basically started the game 0-3. But the problem for Golden Guardians was they were losing the rest of the map so hard. Like mid lane was getting destroyed, bot lane was getting destroyed, and that was part of the reason why I said like Golden Guardians was just simply getting outclassed individually. So this idea and game plan of like, oh, we're just gonna throw all of our resources top won't work against Cloud9 because you're just gonna get outplayed individually on the rest of the map. You saw specifically in this EG game, they threw all their resources topside to shut Summit down in the early game on the Jace pick, and they were still able to hold their own in these other lanes. And not even hold their own, as you mentioned, make plays on the other side of the map. Because we saw Jojo Pion, he went top early to dive, to get a 3-man dive off in the early game. Then they went bot lane like 3 minutes later to get I don't know if it was a dive, but they like pressured them off like a stacked wave. But I thought EG just basically did exactly what Golden Guardians did in the early game. If you go back and look at that Golden Guardians versus Cloud9 series, their early game was almost exactly the same as Evil Geniuses, but they're just better players, so it just worked exactly like it did against 100 Thieves.
Yeah. And something else I wanted to talk about, because it relates to one of our, maybe last week or the week prior, we mentioned how Alistar we don't think is one of the greater picks right now. However, as you know very well, it's one of Vulcan's best picks, maybe his best pick. And did he absolutely show up on that pick in that game? I believe it was game 3, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Multiple 3-man pulves. Like, that is a pick that, you know how I mentioned before where who he didn't show up on his pocket pick? Vulcan did, and that's a really, really good sign, because honestly, Vulcan, when he's on and when he's on one of his pocket picks, that is a recipe to win. And they hard smashed with the Alistar in that game. And I hope, even though we don't think Alistar is one of the top tier supports right now, I hope that we see it again in the weekend coming up, because I think they will have success if they put him back on it.
Yeah, for EG only. I think EG is the only
Good
ones.
thing.
Well, because he's like good at the champion, and like, yeah, it's one of his best picks. And from what we've seen out of Core JJ's Alistar, it's not that good. Let's put that guy back on the Leonas, on the Nautiluses, on the Rakans.
I'm still not against Corey JJ's Alistar. Do I think
It
he
ain't
has
that
better
hot.
picks? I agree. I don't think it's as bad as you think it is, but the thing is, Corey JJ could play a billion things.
Well,
So
I
maybe the
do
argument
like
is, why play Alistar if he could play a billion other things? Maybe that's the argument.
I do like the Alistar though into the Lucian Nami specifically, because like it is a really good champion in terms of punishing kind of like what Lucian wants to do. Like when Lucian wants to dash in with the Nami Empower on top of him, like Lucian's got to go forward, and like that's exactly when you throw your Alistar combo out. And they were doing a really good job of layering that on top of the Nocturne ulti in team fights. But even in the early game when they were just skirmishing bot lane, like it would be Hellbit Pulv into Zeri W spam Qs, and then Berserker and Isles had to back off, and they were losing every trade. Like there was maybe only in the early game there was that like one gank that Cloud9 kind of outplayed 2v3 where they got a 2v2 kill. Then Inspired came in and killed Berserker, and then Isles kind of like did some ring around the Rosie and ended up killing. I think it was maybe it was Jojo Pion, not Inspired, but other than that one play that Cloud9 managed to turn around bot lane in the early game, they got destroyed, like you said. Like it,
Yeah.
like Danny
Now,
once again just like popped the hell off, and
so for
the
me,
rest is history.
I don't have much more to say on the series exactly, but I do want to talk a little bit more about EG, because I am now ready to say that the EG, we'll call it an experiment, because I think most people were on board of this experiment, so there weren't really too many doubters. But obviously, you got to go back to the discussion of so many people wanted EG to go after Doublelift and Jensen. Now, you and I have had this discussion before. We think that EG went for the right move by going with these guys. But I think this weekend that just happened proves that it is absolutely a success. And not only was it a success, but this is like a North American talent success. Because for me, I think EG could have even lost this weekend and not gone to Houston, and things would have been okay for EG, because this is still, you got Jojo Pion in his first split, you got Danny in only his second. The fact that they are top 3 is an amazing sign, but not only are they top 3, they're playing really, really well, especially Danny. The amount of damage that this guy puts out is insane. I will keep saying this every week. He puts a lot of damage out, more than most AD carries in the league. And he will carry your team. What more can you ask for out of this guy? And now imagine if they had gone with Doublelift. Which I was not very a really big fan of Doublelift in Doublelift's last season of playing pro. To me, I think it was very obvious that they should have gone with Danny, and I think that you're kind of getting this is like the solidified answer as to yes, this was definitely a success. And look, things can still go bad in summer, right? Things could fall apart, and maybe they don't make worlds. But as of right now, could you ask for any better outcome of your spring split than making top 3 and going to Houston? I think this is already a bonus for where EG is at right now. What do you think?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm not trying to flame Jojo Pune here, but to me, when I look at the duo, it's more like Danny's a beast than like Danny's just way better than where Jojo Pune's at right
Yeah,
now.
JoJo's a lot more volatile, I
Yeah,
would say.
like
Yeah.
if I had to like make a statement right here and now, like I would say like if EG had Jensen this split, it probably would be more successful than it was. Just because
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Jensen's a more tenured player and he'll probably fit into the team quite well. He has familiarity with Impact. So, I wouldn't be surprised at all if, you put Jensen instead of JoJo in this team, they probably would have had better results in spring. However, the trajectory that both of these players are on right now is what's really important, as you mentioned, when it comes to talking about and looking towards the future for a very young team. And, they've done what seems to be like a really good job of putting the veteran pieces around them because, I mean, like you said, like this is all like icing on the cake because people thought like bringing in Inspired, like he was going to be the superstar player on this team, even though they did have Danny and everyone recognized that Danny was going to be a really great talent. Like, no, it's actually Danny is the superstar of this team and Inspired is just more of the facilitator, it turns out to be. Like the stars of this team are JoJo and Danny. And while I do think that JoJo still has some more to work on, and me personally, I'm not ready to just definitively call him a top mid and an A, I would probably put him in the 3 to 4 category right now. But like, guess what? Like, it's only going to get better from here because.
And for your first split?
Yeah, exactly.
That is amazing. So this is something I think North American fans in general should get hyped for. There's always a call for North American talent. This is it. This is more than you could ask for. And so I think, or I guess I just hope that the fans that were hoping for American talent or North American talent to get on these rosters, you've got it and you have success out of it. I feel like NA fans should be, over the moon or whatever the hell that friggin' expression is. Incredibly happy with the results that EG put up this spring. Now, did you have anything else on the EG C9 stuff?
Yeah, dude, just start playing Fortnite, dude. Like that's the way to success. Jojo Pune was pro Fortnite player. Now he's like good mid laner. Like, hey, get back on that.
If you don't have anything else on the EG C9 series, I want to get to the C9 post-mortem that we like to do.
Oh, yes.
If that's okay with you. So for new listeners, JNT and I have been doing a post-mortem after any team gets eliminated. So this week it is to give a score of 1 to 10 with how happy the org would be with the result of the split based off how they came into the split. And so obviously Cloud9 from the rating of 1 to 10, it has to be very low now that they're knocked out. I guess I'll start with this one. I gave them a 2.5 out of 10. And you're maybe wondering why not a 1 because they're probably really pissed off. Well, there's a couple copium things to hang on to here. 1, you did make playoffs. You didn't go full TSM. 2, you won a playoff series. However, you only beat Golden Guardians. So I can't really give a lot of points for that. And then you had Fudge have the successful role swap, I would say. Was Fudge the best mid laner in the league? No, but he was one of. Could he have been better? Sure. Was it a weak mid lane pool? Yes, still. But I would still say it was success for a guy who's playing a completely new role. So that's all the good stuff for Cloud9. But look, you can't ignore that you commit your whole brand to a new coach and LS, obviously, and then you fire him just a couple of weeks into the season. That is absolute disaster. And then not only that, your season is going great, and then you absolutely tank the very, a week or two before playoffs start, and then you tank in playoffs as well. There's very, very, like I mentioned, the couple of good things to hang on to for Cloud9. But those things that I just mentioned, the bad things, just are so overwhelmingly bad that it's hard to give a lot of points for this. How happy is Cloud9? And so that's why I gave them a 2.5 out of 10 score. I think Jack is probably malding, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I'm going to do a bit of copy and paste from one of our previous ones. And for similar reasons, I'm giving him a 3 out of 10. And my kind of what I just referenced there was I gave FlyQuest a 3 out of 10 prior. And the majority of that is because it's the way that the season started versus the way that the season ended. And you just, as Cloud9 is moving into the next split, like they have way more questions than answers. But what I will say about their, my reasoning for not giving them like a 1 or a 2 and sort of a little bit of the copium, although I wouldn't even call it copium, is that it wasn't like Cloud9 kind of like, I guess when I say this now, all of a sudden, like it wasn't like they all of a sudden just lost the series and were eliminated, because they had been struggling for quite some time now. Like, let's not forget, like the problems in Cloud9 arose in week 7 of the summer split. Sorry, not the summer split, of the spring split. And week 7 looked shaky, where they went 1-1, and they lost to, I forget who they lost. They lost to TSM in like that game. And then they kind of like they beat down CLG. And then in week 8, when going to the Super Week, they lost 2 games. One of them to FlyQuest, the other one to 100 Thieves, who were like, at the time, they not necessarily the best teams. And like these are games that Cloud9 should be easily winning in our minds. And so you go into playoffs with a bit of a question mark, and then you're like, oh, like, they're probably still going to beat 100 Thieves in the best of five. Like, oh no, like they got shit stomped, 3-0, go next. And then they go against Golden Guardians, and it was like they're probably expected to beat Golden Guardians, but would people be surprised at all if they lost? Like, no, not really, because they're struggling. But then once again, like they go up against EG, and similarly to 100 Thieves, like I don't think people were going to be surprised if Cloud9 lost the series. However, the fashion that it happened in, where they just got completely stomped and there was almost no hope all 3 of the games, like that was more the surprising aspect. And my reasoning for the 3 is like, it does feel like Cloud9 has some pretty clear holes, and they have some clear, they should have a clear idea of what they need to improve from a roster standpoint going into next season. Now, I think first and foremost, the most important question you have to ask yourself is, what the hell are we doing at support? And I think support kind of has a bit of a cascading effect on the rest of the team, because if you want to try to insert Winsome back into the lineup and kind of go back with more of this Korean style that, as you kind of mentioned, they built their brand around to begin with, that we would probably assume then that Berserker's staying. If not, however, if they want to go in a different direction, whether that is promote Isles to the main team and demote Winsome to the academy team, then you open the box of Sven. Like, if I'm Sven right now, like, although like I probably, I'm enjoying my time on Cloud9, and maybe I'm a little bit upset like that the team got shit on so far. At the same time, like, he's got to be pretty happy, because the road is currently looking like, Sven might get back in here if Cloud9 decide to ditch this whole Korean, aspect of their team. And, big elephant in the room, Summit is just like turned into a dirty Inter. And if like, dude, it would not be surprising at all to see if Cloud9 kind of dips on this whole Korean thing, and we see like a completely new look roster out of Cloud9. The only person who I would say has like their spot is guaranteed at this point. Like, if I had to pick only one person and one person only, I would say Fudge.
Blabber.
I would say
Blabber?
Fudge.
No.
Oh,
Why Fudge?
Oh,
you mean on the roster altogether? Because I thought, because the conversation is that Fudge could go top.
Well, I just mean like
Fudge. Position, you just mean player.
Yeah, Fudge will be on the team no matter what. Although I do think that they'll retain Blabber. Like, I think But if I had to pick one player, like if I had to pick one, it would be Fudge. Because I mean, Blabber. Part of my problem with Cloud9, like, heavily surrounded Blabber in both of the series against 100 Thieves and Evil Geniuses, because I just thought he was playing the early game like complete trash. Like, he felt like he didn't know what to do in the early game relative to his comp. Like, I mean, I was kind of talking about this when we were watching Game 1 of Cloud9 versus EG. Like, Blabber needs to be like covering topside when topside wants to push in waves post level 6, when you know that Ornn and Nocturne have access to their ultimates. And I remember one specific instance where Summit has a lane. Summit's current lane state is the wave is stacking on his side, and he wants to go out and push the lane. And Blabber's farming Krugs at the time, and then he just kind of presses recall. Summit tries to force the push on the wave by like Jace range EQing, and then like diving into melee with the hammer form, and then he just gets double ulted and dies, and the game is pretty much over from there. And like, that was just an exact instance where I'm like, dude, like, Blabber, your job in the early game is to make sure this Jace wins his lane and doesn't die, because Jace is a very vulnerable champion against the Ornn and the Nocturne. And it was just like right from then and there, like I was just like, well, like this is not a good look for this series so far if Blabber doesn't know what he's doing. And while I do think that Blabber is still one of their best players on their team, he does some questionable things at points.
Yeah, I mean, that's always been Blabber. For me, there's no question that Blabber's sticking on the roster. For me, I guess I would say there's 2 players that they have to keep, and that's Blabber and Fudge.
Yeah.
So I'm surprised that you only have the one of there.
No, I said if you have to pick one.
Gotcha.
Like, I think most people would say, like, if I had to pick one, Blabber would be staying. But no, like, I think Fudge is more important to them right now than Blabber is.
And
because of the
regardless, I think
uncertainty surrounding the rest of the roster.
regardless, I don't think there's a world where either one is gone. So I would easily put both of them in. But then you mentioned how how like one of the things they have to answer is what are you doing with support? But like that to me is so like yeah, support, but also AD and also top. Those are three really big question marks going into summer split, and I don't think anyone really knows what the hell they're going to do. There's a lot of people that are saying Summit's gone. There's a lot of people that are saying, well, you got to keep Summit. He was your MVP, and let's be honest, it's not an easy decision. How do you just replace an MVP like that? How do you just get rid of one?
Like
Does Summit even want to play? There was the rumor. I think I heard this on Hotline League tonight. I don't know if I'm getting. Maybe it was on the dive. I don't remember. But there was rumors that. Oh, I think it was on the dive actually. That if Summit lost, he was going to retire. Now, there was no solid rumor about that, but I'm pretty sure I heard that on the dive, and I'm going, "What is this?
that
What? I
sounds
didn't
kind of
hear
random.
anything about that. It does sound random. I didn't hear anything about that at all, except for on the dive, and I was like, I don't know what that. I don't know what that's about. Um, regardless, there's a lot of problems, and you mentioned the with when you're giving like your out of 10 score, what is next split going to look like? This is the big question mark for Cloud9, and there's so many names to throw out. You mentioned Sven, then obviously you have to mention Jensen at this point, right? Because Fudge could easily go top. Fudge could go top. Jensen could go in. What about Jizuke? Could Jizuke be on the table? Could Niski be on the table? You know, you're not getting Vulcan back to play with Sven. Then there's talk about Copy possibly going in. There is so many options for Cloud9. I shouldn't even say there's so many options, possible options, which makes it a lot different than like the fly quest that we talked about in past weeks. Whereas like that's the one thing that C9 has going for them is that they do have cash and they do have a team still that players want to play for. Whereas like TSM doesn't, for example. Let's say Jensen is considering coming back, which I think most people want or think Jensen will come back. It's more likely that he goes to C9 than TSM, right? If you're Jensen, you'd rather go to C9. So that's something. There's a bargaining chip, I guess, is what I'm trying to say that C9 still has on their side.
Yeah, and I mean, last thing I'll say about this is we talked about all these different roster possibilities with Cloud9, but I don't think it would be that surprising if they ran the same roster back, just based off of where they were at one point. Because to me, once again, like I will say, like to me, Cloud9's problems were more about their inability to identify what they wanted to in the early game, plus their kind of stubbornness to play this, play. I don't want to say play, but draft around this idea of Summit carrying in the top lane and not really deviate from that path at all. Like we saw one game in the Golden Guardians versus Cloud9 series where Summit played the Ornn. But every other game in the entire 100 Thieves series, we saw Summit on these early aggressive picks. In two of those Golden Guardians games, we saw him with the counter Gangplank into Ornn. That was also another pick that I think is pretty good into Ornn. When I was talking about Camille earlier, I like the Gangplank into Ornn. But in this series, like similar thing, like early aggressive champion into these beefy tanks, and if he can't do what he had been doing previously, like it's just the investment that you're putting into him in the draft and in the early game is not worth it at all. So it wouldn't be surprising if Cloud9, went with the same roster, but I would expect some like massive sort of changes in their philosophy of how they play the game, because hopefully they've recognized that what they're doing right now is not working at all whatsoever, and the meta is sort of shifting away from this like top isolated island 1v1 mechanical outplay each other like Jay Snar type meta, and it's more about these beefy tank team fighters.
So I actually would be surprised if they ran back the same roster. My concern is that we mentioned this has been about a month now that we've seen these problems, and they didn't even start playing different champions over the span of a month. Once it's kind of been, once they've been exposed, if you will, as to how to beat Cloud9, a month is a long time to be able to adapt and change, and we really didn't see much of that. Now, you could argue that going into summer, you have a couple of more months to try to adapt and change, so it's possible, but I still don't think it's a good sign if you have a month and you don't really change much. That to me is what makes me think that they don't run back the same roster, but it's all dependent on what their options are, right? You never really know what their options are, so
Yeah,
I guess we'll
I
just have to
guess
wait and see.
to sort of play devil's advocate a little bit, like maybe in their minds they're thinking like, well, we can't like reinvent the wheel here in these playoffs. Like, we just need to we need to like continue to go with what was working prior and like maybe fix up some smaller things. But I think from the outside, like, it was pretty clear that there were like some major overarching issues than just like we need to play better or something like that.
Yeah, and we'll have to wait and see. Okay, last question to you on it, Jinter. If you're the GM, who do you want them to go after, or do you want them to keep the same roster?
It's weird. Like,
Okay, let me start with this. Would you rather them go after Jensen or Niski?
probably Jensen, I think.
Interesting. I would say Niski just because of the success he had with Blabber.
Yeah, I mean, same sort of thing with Jensen as well. Like, Jensen and Blabber, I mean, they didn't play together for very long, but like they were kind of like the 1-2 punch of Cloud9 in season 8.
Yeah, and then there was the Swole Bros. You remember that?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
weird though.
anyways.
The way that I see it is, I think it's either going to be a completely revamped roster or the same roster. I don't think we're going to see a thing where I don't think we're just going to get one change or two changes. I think it's either going to be 0 or 3. That's my prediction.
Yeah, I honestly have no idea what the hell it's gonna look like. There's, like I mentioned all the names. I threw out all the names that like you could consider in the conversation, and there's just too many options for me to put my finger on it. So I don't know. I guess the only thing I would say is I would go after Niski if I was in Jack's shoes, but who knows? Because there's rumors that Niski might go elsewhere. So. Let's move on to TLEG. We got the series coming up this weekend. That is the first series that should be on Saturday, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Yep.
First series in Houston. J&T, did this weekend change your mind as to who you think the favorite is? I think we would have agreed that TL is the favorite. Is that still the case for you?
Yes, and I kind of say that like I sigh a little bit as I say that, mainly because I I just think that TL is better. Like I feel like I always resort to this when it comes to two really close teams, that I always just prefer the team who, in my opinion, has the better individual players. And once again, like I talk about this all the time. Like, if I go pound for pound and we go lane by lane, like Whippo versus Impact, even with Bwippo's struggles, I'll take Bwippo. Santorin versus Inspired, I'll take Inspired. Bjergsen versus Jojo, like I'll take Bjergsen. And like their bot lane is actually like very close. Like, if you told me at the start of the season, would I rather have Hansama or Core JJ or Danny or Vulcan, I'd have been like, Hansama, Core JJ, not even close. But Vulcan, I think, has quietly had a really, really good season. I remember I was very high on him when the regular season ended, and Danny's a beast, obviously. But like, EG's bot lane is no joke. I think they, right now, I would have to say, is the best bot lane in the league. So to me, bot lane's like a coin flip.
Yeah, I guess the only area that I see as like a weakness for TL at the moment is Bwippo, and I even mentioned to call it a weakness because, like I mentioned before, like if there's a guy that you think could turn it around, it would be a veteran like Bwippo. And the only problem is that, yes, I know they took them to 5 games in their last series, but I don't think Impact can do to Bwippo what Someday just did to Bwippo. That's my concern with this. Like, I think that's the area you would have to attack. And even though I think Impact is solid, I don't think he's been nearly as good as Someday has. And I guess even when it comes to the jungle, I don't think anyone has been nearly as good as Closer has. So, like, that's kind of tough to replicate, I think. I do think that the 3-2 series for TL was kind of, maybe that was like, I don't want to say lucky. I don't think, but like better than expected out of EG. So for me, I'm going 3-1 for TL. Yeah, I guess I just don't see them really punishing Bwippo that hard to be able to take the series.
Yeah, I'll take the 3-2 TL. Because
you're running back the same thing as what happened already.
Yeah, I want to say, I think I predicted 3-1 previously in that series when it ended up being the 3-2 in favor of TL, because I do think that, like I said before, after that series happened, like the talk right now is more about EG showing up than TL playing bad. But I do think kind of going into this series, it's more about TL playing bad as of late. And I don't think we're going to get a stinky TL 2 best of 5s in a row just because of how good they are individually. Like, I'd be very surprised if this happened. Like, dude, like, to me, like, this roster was this roster was champion or bust, like championship or bust. Like, you cannot build this kind of a roster and not end up winning the split. Like,
And another area that I point to for this series specifically, so I will remind that Core JJ and Bjergsen, their wave management was really, really good against Abadage. You might think, well, what the hell does that have to do with Jojo Pyun? Well, Jojo Pyun has been victim of getting ganked quite a bit as well. And I think that that's another area that I worry for EG is that Bjerg and Core JJ will be able to take advantage of Jojo and punish him a lot more than Fudge and Blabber were able to in the last series. So that's another area where I'm like, I really got to side with TL on that one, in that side as well. The only way I see EG coming out on top in this series is Danny just absolutely popping off, and I guess maybe Inspired as well, because I do think Inspired has looked a lot better as of late. But like, there's just too much talent on the side of TL, and it feels like we're just too much of like TG apologists. But like, come on, man, this roster's so freaking
Yeah.
good. It's hard to predict against them, isn't it?
Yeah, one thing that I'll add on to your point about, JoJo and how he's been a little bit of a weakness in terms of like punishing his over aggressive laning and kind of manipulating the lane in your team's favor by potentially freezing it on your side of the map and, forcing JoJo to potentially overextend to either push out the wave or get minions. And one of the things that I think TL does really well at is kind of repeating plays. Like if you go make a play and you burn a laner's flash, TL is usually very smart about timing that and like planning out the next play X number of minutes down the line when that guy has no flash. Or, for example, when they make the mid lane play, and you saw that in game 2 against 100 Thieves and Abadage, how they were continually able to shut them down in the early game with great lane manipulation in terms of freezing the wave on their side of the map. And that's kind of where Cloud9 seemed to struggle in that game against EG. I think it was game 2 where they got a really good early kill into Jojo Pyun at the start of the game, and it looked like, oh, like this is maybe where the tides are going to turn. Fudge got an early kill on the Corki. Corki's like a really monster scaling champion. Blabber's playing to Trundle. Like that should be an easy repeat gank with no flash. And then you kind of saw like Cloud9 like kind of fumbled the bag a little bit in terms of repeating that play again, because they got counter ganked by Vulcan, and like the game just basically got flipped on its head, and JoJo got 2 kills and just like ran away with the entire game. But TL does a really good job of kind of like pressing where it hurts in terms of like, well, if this guy has no flash, or if we burn this guy's flash, we're coming back, and we're probably going to come back another time after that, and we're just going to fucking kill you until your flash is back up. And then when your flash is back up, we're going to go burn your flash again.
Yeah. And so with that, we both have TL moving on to the finals then, which would then be a 100 Thieves versus TL finals. So how do we go about the predictions for that series, J&T?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're both assuming that TL is going to meet 100 Thieves in the finals, but I think we can give like a tentative, like if EG makes it, we'll say that as well. However, I'm going to sigh as I say this again. I think if TL makes it back to the finals, dude, TL's going to win. And I feel, but I fear that we're like underrating like 100 Thieves, similar to what everyone else was doing at the end of summer last year, where like 100 Thieves was just playing solid. Like they just weren't making any mistakes, and like TL was playing bad. And I just think that like we're not gonna get that again, where TL's just playing bad.
Here's the thing, like you could think 100 Thieves is a good team and still think they're gonna lose. That's probably the ship that both you and I are in right now. Do I think TL's gonna win this weekend? Yes, I do, but like I'm still really impressed with 100 Thieves.
I am
mentioned
too.
how impressed I with them out of the top side of the map. I just think TL is better across all 5 roles, and unfortunately,
all 5. Interesting. Closer?
no, not. No, I didn't. That's not how I meant to say that. I meant to say like as a whole, like the team altogether is what I meant to say.
As a whole,
that was very, very poor choice of words. That's not what I meant. Because obviously, I would go jungle and top. I would give to the side of 100 Thieves. But I just mean altogether. I just think TL is the better roster. Like that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I got you.
Yeah. I lost my train of thought with my little slip up there.
TL's a better team. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, but I wanted to go back to the I actually wanted to talk about if 100 Thieves were to win this series, what would that mean for the league altogether? Because there's always this conversation of, well, it's the top 3 and like TL, TSM, C9 are the teams that pretty much win all the championships. And there's this discussion after 100 Thieves won their first title last year. It kind of was like, hey, this is nice. There's a new team. And it kind of got me wondering, with 100 Thieves possibly winning this series, it made me start to wonder, if 100 Thieves win this, are we ready to put them up with all of the other orgs in North America? And for me, I say not yet, but I think they're very close if they do win. What do you think, JT?
I would agree with you, mainly because I think it takes more than just two. And I think you need to see it from them consistently. And like, not to like flame 100 Thieves, but apart from their inaugural split where they went to finals right at the start of franchising, they got shit stomped 3-0 by Team Liquid in that series. They didn't really find a lot of success the rest of the way. They did end up going to Worlds in Season 8, but I think they placed like fourth in the regular season. They barely eked out the auto qualify to Worlds in Season 8 based off of championship points because they went to finals and because they finished fourth at the end of summer. But when you look at Season 9 and Season 10, like, this was a team that wasn't very good. Like, they were kind of middle of the pack to bottom of the pack for the majority of those four splits. And while I do think they've done a really good job over the last year in terms of building a new roster, I mean, it's a bit of a meme because like they didn't really build the roster; they just bought out an already good roster.
It's still built roster.
No, but like,
I still give I get
no,
what you say, but I still give it like you build a roster by getting the good players. TL has done that. Like TL just takes
there's nothing wrong with that.
And you know, yeah.
Yeah, but I do think that we do need to see it consistently from them because I mean, I'm not saying 100 Thieves is CLG, but we saw CLG sit at the top of NA for two splits, and like look at where CLG is at now. And I'm not saying at all that like that's gonna be what's happened, and like that's 100 Thieves is gonna fall off a cliff. But we need to see it. Doesn't necessarily mean they need to continue to win championship after championship, but we need to see this team compete in the top 3 for like a solid 2 years in a row. Like that seems like a fair request.
Yeah, and that's where I differ because you mentioned they need to win more than 2, but I don't think they need to win more than 2. I just think they need to be around. There was a long time Cloud9 went on a long drought without winning, right? But they had really good international performances and they made it to the finals quite often. Yes, they lost in finals quite often, but that was enough to call C9 like a top org and one of the big 3, if you will, in the league. And so what I would say is if they win this, or even if they lose this, but they keep going back to, they go to summer finals, or they have a pretty good Worlds performance, that is enough for me to put them in that conversation of one of the top tier orgs in the league. It's not just winning in the LCS, because a lot of fans, myself included, care a lot about how the North American teams do on the international stage. And for me, that's why C9 was always a top tier team. They didn't win North America all that much, and just within the last couple of years did they start winning titles again, right?
Mm-hmm. It's definitely close because, in terms of the history of the LCS, I think right at the top you have, I guess, when I say history, I don't mean like include all of history, but like right now where we're sitting at this very moment, like the top orgs are probably, like if you were to average it out, would be 100 Thieves, Team Liquid, and Cloud9 right now. And TSM is a bit of a question mark just because they haven't made Worlds. They made one Worlds in the past 4 seasons. They lost their streak of like making finals every split in Season 8 when they didn't make finals either time. They did make finals in Season 9, and they won it in Season 10 summer. But TSM is a bit of a question mark right now. And then we kind of have these like rising stars in EG. Like, I know that they haven't won a title, but like EG's actually been a pretty good team for the last 2 years almost. Like, ever since they came back into the league, like they've been perennial playoff contenders, and like they usually finish at the very least like 5th place. Like, they haven't won anything, and
that's not nearly enough to put themselves in the conversation of top tier.
But I mean, though, right? when we talk about the league in terms of like, is it top 2, is it top 3, is it top 4? Should 100 Thieves win, I think it's pretty safe to say that the definitive top 3 would be C9, TL, and 100 Thieves.
Yeah.
TSM, maybe they can reinsert themselves back into it with like a big push for summer, but as of right now, like the top 3, if I were to identify a top 3, it's 100 Thieves, TL, and C9.
Yeah. And that's fair. Now, back more towards this series specifically, I guess we should kind of talk about how we think this series is going to go. Look, I think that it's weird to predict TL to come out on top in a series where they just lost to this team. However, that is what I'm going to do. I am going to give TL the 3-2. And it's mostly because I don't think, look, just ban Orin forehead. I don't think you're going to give someday Orin again. And I do think that even though he has other picks he can play, I think he is definitely more influential on that pick. So I think that matters. The other thing that I think matters is I do think that 100 Thieves without closer on the J4 or the Lee Sin, I think that matters as well. Like, yes, they did win Game 5 without him on that pick, but you could definitely see the impact that he has on games when he's able to make the plays versus when he's not able to. And we mentioned how who he didn't have the greatest weekend, who he was a guy that you used to be able to rely to get fights started and to engage on. And I don't know if you can rely on that anymore out of 100 Thieves. And so that's where I'm a little bit nervous for them going into the finals weekend. Do they have a shot to win? Absolutely they do. I just don't think they're the favorites, despite the fact that they just beat TL.
So did you give a game score? I'm gonna say 3-1 TL.
3-2. I'm going 3-2 TL. You're going 3-1?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they
I'm running back to 5 games again. Yeah, that's the other thing too, is like they did win game 5 on a backdoor. Like, do I see that mistake happening again? No. And look, there's a bunch of variants, right? Like there's a bunch of different things that could happen. There's a bunch of different ways that games can end. But that's one of them where I'm like, I don't know if I think that'll happen again.
Yeah, and I guess we can just briefly say, in a world where EG ends up beating TL, I would then pick 100 Thieves to win the split, because I think, the strength of their top side in Someday and Closer, I think, would be enough to sort of push them over the edge and beat what I think is a really strong team out of EG, just in terms of like their team fighting and their sort of macro, because they do kind of slip up a little bit in the early mid game in terms of objective control, and just kind of falling a bit behind the curve in terms of like dragons and rift heralds and these big important tools that really help you kind of snowball games in the early game. 100 Thieves, on the other hand, does a great job of snowballing games in the early game when Closer is able to get those leads and work really well with Abadage or Someday. So if EG beats TL, I would pick 100 Thieves to beat EG 3-1, similar score. What about yourself if you had to pick?
Uh, yeah, I think 100 Thieves would 3-0 them, to be honest. Which
Oh,
I know
damn.
I'm wearing the EG jersey. So I'm gonna flex a little bit here. I have perfect predictions so far these playoffs. Not in game score, not in that, but I've actually gotten every series right so far. And I highly doubt people have noticed this, but every time I wear the jersey of the team, every time I wear a jersey, right now I'm wearing the EG one for our listeners, that team gets eliminated. And I've done this on purpose where I wear this jersey because I think it's the last time that they're going to play this weekend. So 2 weeks ago, you saw me in the FlyQuest jersey. I was pretty sure it was the last time we were going to see FlyQuest. And last week, I wore the Cloud9 jersey. I was pretty sure it was the last time we were going to see Cloud9. The reason why I'm wearing EG is because I think this is going to be their last series. I guess
I
they get
see.
knocked out. I guess like it has to be the last weekend, but it could be their last series on the Saturday, and I'm predicting that again. So there is the pattern there. Yeah, I'm going for the perfect predictions, J&T. Do you think I have a shot? I think I do. I think TLTL sounds pretty good.
I think so.
Yeah. Hopefully they don't let me down. But look, I love EG. I love the NA talent. I just don't think they're on the same level as TL or 100 Thieves, despite the fact that they have looked pretty good lately, and despite the fact that they took TL to 5 games. I still think there's a gap there. I really do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what's next?
Well, little mini discussion. I don't even know if I would call it a discussion, but something that I thought was kind of interesting that I wanted to talk about. Because I think the both of us, we watch a lot of, or consume excuse me, a lot of Cadral content, question mark. I guess maybe I could
He's
rephrase that
hilarious. I love
into
Cadral content.
we always like to know and kind of keep in the loop about his thoughts and opinions on specific things. And I saw a pretty interesting conversation on his Twitter, and then he released kind of like on his Clips YouTube channel about, was that he thinks that the winner of MSI should be guaranteed a spot at the World Championship. And I was like, that's interesting. And my, first and immediate thought was, no, that's stupid. And after further thought, I was like, I can see in a world where you want to make that argument. And one of the reasons, his reasoning for kind of laying it out there is, if the team who wins MSI, like the team that wins MSI, clearly is good enough to compete on the international stage and therefore should go to the World Championship and not have, the added pressure of a tighter schedule in the summer split, when it comes to practicing and preparing and being able to take the proper break necessary going into the next split to sort of prevent burnout. But then at the same time, I was thinking like, well, I completely agree that if you win MSI at a certain point, like your team is probably good enough to compete on the world championship. And yeah, it will be an added benefit for the teams because they won't have to put as much pressure on themselves in the summer split to practice. But that's not what it's about. It's about sending the best possible teams to the world championship. So in a world where T1 wins MSI, and should they be guaranteed a world spot? Yeah, but if the LCK goes into summer split and there are 4 teams that are clearly better than T1, then I wouldn't want T1 to go to Worlds because I want the best teams to be there and the best teams to compete, and I want the best team to win. And if T1 would not be playing like one of the top 4 teams in their own domestic region, that doesn't discount the fact that they could probably go to the Worlds. They could go to Worlds and win games, but it's more about you need to do service to the rest of your region and those other top teams to make sure that they're at Worlds.
Yeah, so in short, I really like it, honestly. I like the idea. I think it's actually a really good idea, but I don't think it's as simple as, yeah, that'd be sweet, let's do it. I guess my question is, what spot do they get secured? Because if they don't win their own region, does that mean, but they won MSI, and let's say they finish like 4th in their own region, or I guess they top 4 go from those regions. Let's say they finish 5th then. Let's say it's a Korean team that wins and they finish 5th in summer. Do they also get a spot into play-ins instead? Like, how does that, like, where does their spot get, you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, no, I get it, because
groups right away? Because I think it would be okay if you just automatically put them in play-ins at the very least. That I have no problem. Now, you do have to figure out how you fit them in there, right? Because obviously the more teams you add, different formats will change and whatnot. But if the idea is you automatically secure a spot at Worlds in play-ins, that to me is a really simple way of being like, yeah, honestly, that's not a drastic change to me. And so if that were the case, I'd be like, yeah, sounds good to me.
Yeah, I think I guess I would have 2 sort of opinions based on how that would actually work in practice. Because if it's sort of they get their own spot no matter what, because if the region that wins MSI gets an extra spot for the region at the World Championship, and in the case of North America, China, Europe, and Korea, they would go from 4 spots. They would get an extra spot, making the total to 4 spots in comparison to 3 spots. And like another region is given an extra spot based on the history of their region's performance at international events over the past 2 years. But if it was like, as you mentioned, if T1 won in a world, but they finished 5th in the summer playoffs, like if then Korea sends 5 teams and T1 goes directly into play-ins, I think that would be okay. However, I don't think it would be okay if it's not an extra spot. You're just guaranteed a spot no matter what. And therefore, if you finish 5th, you would then kick out the 4th place team because, like, oh, too bad, so sad. Like, you didn't get 3rd place, you got 4th place. And since we get the guaranteed spot, like, I don't think it would work like that. And that would be kind of like, that would a bit irk me because, as I previously mentioned, like, when it comes to Worlds, like, I want the best teams to be there. Like, as much as, I support Cloud9 and I want Cloud9 to be at Worlds, like the year, like in season 10 when they didn't make Worlds, like they didn't deserve to go to Worlds. Like they were trash. Like they were hot garbage. And as much as I want C9 to go to MSI this split, and I would like wanted them to turn it around, like dude, they wouldn't have done shit at MSI. Like they're trash right now. Like send 100 Thieves or TL in my opinion. So yeah, I guess what I would say is I don't know if I would like give them an auto qualify to Worlds because I do think that's like a little bit extreme. I would probably rather them like get auto qualified to like their own regional playoffs because at a certain point, like you still got to prove that you're a good team in your own region in best of 5s. Like if it was sort of
MSI is separate from like the LCK, for example, though. So like I don't know how you could implement that. Like that's kind of you have to change the rules for specific leagues. Whereas like LOL Esports runs MSI and like the LCK runs LCK. You know what I mean? So it's like the MSI can't really decide things for the LCK, can they?
Well, I don't know. Like
they just work in tandem. They just work together to figure out.
They can do whatever they want. I mean, I think it would have to be something that's accepted by every region because when it comes to making overarching changes to the global esports scale, like it has to be agreed upon between all regions. Like, so like when we talked about the import rule way back in the day, I say way back in the day, that was like, what is this, a year ago now? Where like the rumors were like, remove the import rule, but it's not something that like NA can just only remove the import rule. Like if it's going to get removed, it has to get removed for all regions. So
right.
I do think that the MSI winner should get some sort of bonus, and I think auto getting into Worlds is a little bit extreme, just because I think you're doing a little bit of a disservice to the rest of your region in terms of like, because even though you won MSI, like you still got to go prove it to the rest of your region that like we're still good
Yeah.
enough to be in the top 5, in the top 4, in the top 3, and I think if they were to get auto qualified into playoffs, that would definitely alleviate the stress of like, the summer split in terms of like, wow, we don't really get to take a break because we went to MSI. Like we have to immediately jump right back into things, and we're actually like probably behind because other teams have been scrimming on a more recent patch, whatever, whatever. So I'm of the I have agreed with him that the MSI winner should get some more bonuses, but I don't think I'm fully on board with guaranteeing them a world spot.
Yeah, for me, I like the idea, but again, I need to hear how it's going to be implemented first before I have a strong opinion on it because, like we mentioned, it's going to change up a bunch of things. So, like, the format will have to change somehow if it's possible that you have 5 LCK teams going, right? For example.
Yeah.
So, lots of things
And
can change.
then you might have an extra team at the tournament, so then you have to like potentially change your play-in stage format, and then like
Right.
you're gonna
That's what I
have you're
mean.
gonna have a whack number of groups, or planes is gonna be weird because like you'll maybe have to get like two representatives from LCK or LPL, for example. Like normally
That's what I
it's
mean.
yeah,
And
yeah,
the other thing too is that China might not be at MSI this year, so
yeah.
definitely can't implement it this year, or at least I don't think you can. I don't know, but anyways, it's an interesting idea. I would like to hear more about it before anything like that gets implemented, but who knows? The thing is, someone like Cadril does have the influence to swing opinions on such things, so we'll have to wait and see. Off-season rumors, yeah.
Yeah, we're finals are still kind of going on around the world. NA next weekend are finals. I believe LPL finals are in like 9 days. I think it's not
Okay.
this. It's not this coming week, but it's next week, I believe. However, we're getting an early start to all the off-season roster rumors. I think kind of even at the beginning of this week, there were some roster rumors that were kind of being floated out there, and we're hearing some names of players swapping regions, swapping teams. I don't think we've heard any swapping roles yet, but
Spill him, J&T. Spill
yeah.
him.
So NA, there's two of them so far. They kind of were. One is much more like of a rumor than another. The first one is Maple to Dignitas. If you don't know who Maple is, let me jog your memory. Mid laner for PSG Talon. Mid laner for Flash Wolves, which is like the perennial LMS like gods who were pretty much always at the international event uh, at the top of the region. So potentially going to Dignitas as a mid laner, which if you don't forget, River used to play on PSG Talon, and they were teammates, and they probably know each other quite well. So while I do think that's like a good move, and like that would be an upgrade for Dignitas, like a bit sad for Blue because I thought he had a really good year actually.
Yeah, that's the only thing that's surprising about it. It's not that, other imports couldn't come over. It's that Blue started to look better as the split went on. And so like it's like you better be damn sure that you're getting someone better. Now, I'm not going to pretend I watch Maple play. I don't. As I don't really have any strong opinions on it. The only thing I have to say is you better make sure he's better than Blue. I think most people would say he is, but it looks pretty bad if he's not, right?
Yeah, and then the other one, which is kind of a little bit more up in the air, people don't really know what to make of it. Bo, who's been a guy who's been talked about for quite a lot over the last year. If people recall the name Bo, he got banned for match fixing over in the LDL for 6 months, a year ago now, I believe. Potentially going to TSM to jungle, and therefore would probably replace Spica. Which,
Yeah,
in
that's the crazy thing to me. Like, look,
yeah,
I Spica has not had a good split, right? That's it's not that. It's that he goes from MVP, has one split where he's just completely not himself, and then it's possible that he gets replaced. That is like when I heard that, I couldn't believe it. Because not only is he a fan favorite of TSM, but again, like I just said, he was an MVP, what, like, I don't know, 8 months ago or something?
yeah.
That is wild. Now, again, it's just a rumor, so maybe nothing comes of this, but that would be insane. And it also kind of shows that if the rumor is true, it shows that TSM is not straying away from the whole LPL thing. It seems like they're still committed to finding LPL talent and bringing them over to North America. That seems to be the plan still for TSM.
Yeah, and I mean, if you still don't know who Bo is, like he has been pretty much one of the most like hyped up prospects in the LPL for about a year and a half now. He was FPX's sub jungler behind Tian. Basically, I think people really started to know his name in season 10 when I think he subbed in for a couple of games for FPX, and Lamal LP is helping us out in the chat. Like he has a perfect record of games played in the LPL, and although 10-0 is not like that big of a data pool, that's pretty impressive. Considering just the level of talent that's over in the LPL, he's basically kind of like this mechanical god. Um, and he's like he was supposed to be one of these players that was going to be like a future superstar in that league, like a Tian, like or like other famous LPL junglers. I'm forgetting, like a Ning at the time when like IG was winning worlds, like Karsa. I know Karsa's not like native LPL talent, but like he's supposed to be one of the best players in his role in a few years' time, and to see him sort of potentially go over to NA, replace Spica like falling off, like not by his own like demise, because TSM is just like kind of a shit show overall, but it would be a bit weird for me to just like for TSM to like double down on this like LPL thing that they're doing on, because it was kind of a failure in Spring Split.
Yeah, if it doesn't work out again, you're really gonna get memed hard. But I mean, it's TSM; they get memed hard for pretty much everything they do, anyways. Um, Shout out to Lamau LP for helping us out with the LPL stuff. He's kind of a boss with that. He's usually in the live chat, and also shout out Vapire for the sub about 5-10 minutes ago. Forgot to shout him out for that as well. The only other thing that I want to say on it is, if it comes to Spica being replaced, where the hell does Spica go? Because I think you could easily argue that most teams in the LCS are pretty happy with their jungle position. So that's one of the other crazy things, is that Spica could not only just go from TSM MVP, but he could go to a lower tier LCS team, because that might be the only thing that's left. Whether it be CLG, Immortals, maybe Golden Guardians. Like, what other team is not happy with their jungler? Even Golden Guardians is probably pretty happy with Pride Stalker right now. What team needs another jungler?
Yeah, maybe Immortals. That's about it. Golden Guardians,
Like,
if they think that they want to make like a summer split push and think they have the potential. I don't know.
like it's not C9, it's not TL,
It's
it's
not
not
EG.
EG, it's not 100 Thieves, it's not FlyQuest. I don't think either. I think they would keep Jose. I think they're pretty happy with Jose Diodo. Like, these are all teams. Like, maybe Jose Diodo and maybe Pride Stalker could be replaced, but I would still argue that FlyQuest and Golden Guardians are both happy with those junglers. Same thing with Dignitas and River. Like, I think they're happy with him as well. So it's like there's not exactly a lot of jungle positions open. And maybe a lot of people still buy that Spica is still MVP material. Maybe, maybe not. But he had a bad split, so it's not as simple as, oh, just insert MVP here, because we have not seen that MVP Spica for, like I mentioned, about 8 months.
And like, I mean, not to dogpile on Spica here, but the both of us didn't think that he should have won MVP that split. And like,
No,
JNT 250, Blue Jay, TSM hate, like we're TSM hate or whatever.
I
Like,
know. We must just be
like,
TSM haters.
dude, like,
Yeah.
Closer should have won MVP that split.
Yeah, I
Fucking come
agree.
at me, come at me.
We've said this way too many times on this podcast, especially last year when the MVP voting was happening. I said it like a million times that I didn't think Speak was MVP. We don't need to go over that again.
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, it's still honestly just crazy. But there's other rumors going on in Europe as well. Jane T, you want to fill in
Yeah,
our listeners as to that stuff as well?
there's some EU stuff. LEC Wulu, who's like the go-to guy for LEC sources, put out a tweet a couple days ago saying that Rogue and SK don't plan on making any roster changes. I will add, right here, right now, this is not from LEC Wulu, but I think it's pretty safe to say that G2 is not making any roster changes after winning the split and them looking really, really good.
Is that the JNT 250 source? Is that the one that we're getting here?
Yeah, quote me on that. I am the
I mean,
source.
Usually when a team wins, there's not really too many changes that you want to make. So I think that's a fair thing to say. Now, stranger things have happened, but I think you're right in saying that.
Yeah, and then kind of some other things that are kind of swirling about in the universe. Adriel said on his stream that he's hearing that a lot of junglers are actually going to be swapping teams over in the LEC. So He didn't really say that there was going to be like a lot of new junglers being brought in, just that by the way things kind of look right now is a lot of junglers are going to be switching teams. So he didn't really
Hmm.
have a whole lot of specifics, but he kind of the names that he did mention were Razork might be out of Fnatic, Selfmade might be out of Vitality, and what was the other one that he said? Um, there was one more that he said. I'm
I
blanking.
know this. Come on. I should know this. Oh, he was talking about El
El
Yoya.
Yoya, yes, sorry. Yeah, El Yoya. Yeah.
Maybe we shouldn't be looking to North America for destinations for Spica. Maybe Spica goes to the LEC. What do you think, Jinter?
I mean, it could happen.
I'm trolling. I don't think it happens, but it could. But I'm just trolling for people before they think I'm too crazy. Uh, do you remember when at the start of the split of the LEC, I was basically saying like Elyoya is going to go to NA if he doesn't get any better mid laner. I'm pretty sure that's what I said. If he doesn't get a better mid laner, either he's end up going to Fnatic, but at the time there was no rumors for Razork to be replaced, so we were like, that's not going to happen. Or he would go to NA next year, and it seems like it's possible that Elyoya gets his wish in air quotes, not that he actually came out and said anything, but he gets his wish of finding a better team, because I thought that Elyoya was hands down the best player on that team still, and that he was kind of an elo. Hell, it seems like maybe he will have better teammates going into the next split. No offense to Reeker.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm speaking of Reeker. I don't know if it was Wooloo or somebody else put out a tweet or source saying that like Reeker was going to get benched for Mad Lions.
Yeah.
And then the last up in terms of like rumors out of EU, Vitio just won the MVP over in the LEC, could also maybe be on the move. He could potentially be an option for Mad Lions if
Right.
they bench Reeker, and you kind of hinted at it a bit earlier, like Niski ? I think that was another name that Cadril mentioned that Mad Lions might be going after. I would
Mm-hmm.
assume that if Mad Lions is looking to probably go big on a mid laner, if that would be like a Vithio or a Niski, that would probably be assuming that they keep Elyoya, or at the very least get another solid jungler on their team, maybe like a Selfade, maybe like a Razork. So Mad Lions is in a bit of a weird spot because like they have some really good players on that team, but they just weren't that good because of a few glaring holes on their team. Like Armut wasn't playing well at all. Reeker
Yeah, our
was
move
pretty
fell off
bad.
as well.
Reeker was
Yeah.
pretty bad. I thought their bot lane was like solid, but like Kaiser is like nowhere near where he was prior.
The team definitely looks weaker. You could definitely tell. Like, obviously, when you
It
have these
looks
kinds of changes,
Reeker.
of course. Ah. Okay,
Call me
guys. I thought I
freak.
was doing this podcast with JNT 250, but I'm doing it with Freak instead. That wasn't bad. That's not bad, Jinter.
Let's go.
Um. Yeah, you get the Freak stamp of approval, I'm sure. What was I gonna say before you said that hilarious
I don't
cringe
know.
shit? I still liked it. What the fuck was I gonna say though? Um, it should come to me. Should come to me.
But we'll move on
Anyways,
if it jumps into your
yeah,
brain, blurt it out. We
yeah.
got a couple things of quick news. We kind of like had a big discussion about this last week, but Champions Queue. They put out a statement about it, and Olay got his wishes. He was tweeting about it for like 4 days in a row. Just delete Champions Queue, and they did it.
Yeah, we don't want to do too much of a deep dive because we did a pretty deep dive in last week's episode. This was obviously before they just turned it off. I'm still surprised that they turned it off for as long as they did, though. Like, it's opening at the end of May, right?
Yeah,
That to me is a little surprising,
that's a
isn't it?
month and a half. Yeah.
Like, wouldn't it be valuable? I actually don't mind that they want to shut it down while people aren't using it. I think that's fine because you could have a startup date again. So once people have had their break, it's like, okay, this is where we hit the ground running, and you try to build it up again. But that's a long time. I thought if they were going to do that, they would just be like, oh, look, May 1st we'll open it up again. Then you have the month of May to play Champions Queue. But I guess not. Maybe is the idea that like all these teams are going to be in Korea? Because I did hear rumors about some players going to boot camp in Korea. Is
Yeah, I
that
mean,
the play? Is that the reasoning?
I'm not sure exactly. But I mean, teams and players often do Korea boot camps in between spring and summer, especially North
Yeah.
America. Like it's kind of a norm.
And And there's a whole article of all the things that they want to change. They acknowledge that the LP system isn't the greatest and that there's some things that they want to change. Instead of opting out of comms, they want people to opt into comms. I don't really know if that makes a big difference, but apparently it might, or at least they think it will do something. So we'll have to wait and see. There's a whole article if people are interested. You can find it on Reddit, I'm sure. But
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
it
on
looks
LoL
like they
Esports
have,
as well. It was a LoL Esports
yeah.
article.
Yeah, no need to do a huge deep dive into it. We kind of did that last week.
Yeah. And last up, I think one of the things that we even talked about when speaking about Champions Queue, specifically in the offseason, was burnout. And speaking of burnout, Faker, apparently he was talking on stream how like he's all stressed out because he's got a whole bunch of shit going on with T1 because he's doing promo for, T1. He has like the sponsor obligations and he's got like prep for MSI and he's got like this whole Asia Games thing going on.
Well, it's nice to know that he's human
Yeah.
because that's the only thing that I got from this was like, oh, Faker's actually feeling like overwhelmed for once because I mean, he's been playing for God knows how long, been grinding for God knows how long. It's nice to know that he's human, but it's not nice to know that he's getting overwhelmed and burnt out. That's like, don't do that to Faker, man. If there's one guy you don't want that to happen to, it's Faker. So
Yeah, I
I'm
think
a little worried,
everybody.
but I'm not that worried just because I feel like it's something he's been able to manage over the course of his career. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little worried.
Yeah, I feel like it's something that's not necessarily talked about, specifically within esports, and how like the top player in any given game or league just naturally has a lot of pressure, responsibilities, obligations, whatever on them because they are that player. And like people said in the past, like Faker is literally the Michael Jordan of like South Korea and like Asian esports culture. Like he is as big as Michael Jordan is on a worldwide
Hmm.
scale. That's what Faker is like over in the eastern part of the world. Like this guy probably is doing stuff all day, every day. Like whether it's like content for T1, like he probably doesn't get a whole lot of time to himself. And like that's I feel like something we don't really talk about at all when it comes to esports. And that's kind of something that's recognized when it comes to traditional sports. Like, oh, we know this guy has like a lot of things going on, whatever, whatever. And Faker just I feel like this is the first time we're even talking about it and hearing about it because he actually said something. Because it
Yeah.
just feels like something that kind of like flies under the radar, but it's just like impressive that Faker's like been at the top of his game for like almost a decade now, which is just like crazy. Like people always talk about like age within esports and like how short the career is. Like Faker is almost at a decade.
He's
That's
immune.
fucking
He's Gwen.
nuts.
Faker is Gwen. Faker is immune. I actually remember what I wanted to mention before now, if we're done with the Faker thing.
Nice.
What?
Go ahead.
What's nice?
Just go ahead.
Like you said it in a way, man. I don't know. I got bad vibes. No, I was what I was going to say was the surprising thing was the self-made thing. Self-made possibly moving on from what was the super team. That was what was really interesting to me. Was because if they're making, I mean, clearly it wasn't a super team with their performance, but with them looking to make a move, clearly they didn't feel like it was a super team either, and they kind of feel like their super team failed, if you will. That was the thing that I wanted to talk about, just mention that real quick. That like when you have the super team making a move, you know that it was a failure. I think that kind of confirmed that when if they're looking to make moves, but I mean
Yeah,
that isn't for sure yet, though.
I said this in the past, but like any time that an LEC team or an EU LCS team has tried to build a super team, it's failed every single time.
I
Not
mean,
not
even
one.
North America doesn't have the greatest history as well. If
I
you look
mean,
back to TL last year,
even TL this year, right now, like if they don't win finals, like to me, that's a failure because they were the clear cut
yeah,
favorites.
but I don't know. Like, I still think they're the best team in the league. Like, yeah, I suppose they could still fail, right? But I would say right now they're looking okay. But I guess they're close to failing since they just lost a best of 5. But yeah, that to me is not nearly a failure. Like, at least they're making it to the top 3, I guess, and probably finals. Whereas, like, how far
Vitality
did
was fifth. They beat
Yeah,
XL.
that's a
That was
big
about it.
difference to me. Yeah,
Yeah, for
that's a
sure.
pretty significant difference. So, yeah.
And then they got like 3-0 shit stomped.
Anyways, I think it's time we close out the show. If you don't have do you have anything else?
Nope.
I'm gonna do one quick last shout out. I'm gonna remind people again, guys. Prop sheet. If you haven't looked for it yet, and you're listening on YouTube, it will be up soon. If it's not there, It will be up soon. J&T and I are going to work on it tomorrow. We're recording this late Monday night, and so Tuesday we will get going on it, and we're going to post it on Reddit, and we'll post it in Discord. So
I'll
if you haven't
post
joined
it.
the Discord,
I'll post it in the video as well. Once we finish it tomorrow,
okay.
I'll put it in the description and in the comments. So if you are watching, not either on Tuesday, like if you're later on Wednesday, Thursday, if you're still listening, go in the comments. It'll be there, or go in the description. It'll
And
be there.
and please consider supporting us for it. So we don't want to have a little baby prize pool for this thing. We want to have at least a decent prize pool so that people have something to play for. And again, so all donations and subs that we get will go towards funding the prize pool. With
Free
that,
money.
that is it for this episode. Yeah, if you're as five head as you think you are, join and be better than everybody else. That's gonna do it for this week's episode. We will be back same time next week, late Monday nights. You could follow us at twitch.tv/clownfiesta podcast, and of course we're on YouTube for those in the live chat. This has been episode 82 of the Clown Fiesta podcast. Goodbye.